Combustion engines is the most efficient way to transport goods from A to B, but they emit CO2. And if you want to get rid of the CO2, it gets more expensive.
Thanks once again for joining us. We focus today once again on the Teslasemi causes chaos in Germany and the EU based on all the changes that it's forcing to occur. This is Greg for Teslafaninsight. Thanks once again for joining us. If this is your first time, welcome. If you're a repeat visitor, welcome back. We also want to thank our Patreon supporters. If you enjoy the show, like some better ideas on investing and trading, please join us on Patreon. I'm actually going to include our Venmo address if you guys want to support the channel by sending funds to us on Venmo. That would also be appreciated. So what happened was we did a show that we aired yesterday and got a lot of views, and we also got a number of comments. And the goal of today's show was to respond to comments received, and that way we can address some of the concerns that had been raised by different folks. So the primary thing that I'd like to start with is the issue of pollution. So we did so again today. We started with Mr. Daum, the CEO of Daimler Trucks, articulates the fact that you can reduce or get rid of pollution, but there's a cost to doing so in higher cost of vehicles, particularly the battery packs for those electric vehicles. So there's an interesting trade-off that's being going on, and there's an interesting sort of side story. So the primary trade-off is the fact that, as Mr. Daum shared, if you want an electric vehicle right now, it costs more. In theory, over the next couple of years, battery prices will continue to fall, and it'll actually be cheaper to do an electric vehicle than do an ICE combustion vehicle. There's a debate going on in Germany right now, / the EU, and that is, should you fine and force the manufacturers to sort of clean up their fleets, or should you reduce those requirements based on the fact that those folks have not been able to execute on this, or they do not have the technology to do so, and it would cost them so much to make that transition. The cost will be of jobs for people that work at those companies. So I've been fascinated by watching how this debate is going, because I thought when Tesla announced it was going to build a plant near Berlin, that somehow it would be delayed until the company got frustrated and it would not be built. The reason is, if your country has 50% of its jobs reliant upon a certain industry, one would think that the decision had been made that we're just going to make it impossible for that factory to be built. Au contraire, not only has the factory been built, they're employing, I read, 12,500 people at that plant, but that doesn't include the engineering center that they bought that's in another part of Germany. And we're not talking about service center employees and all that stuff. So I wouldn't be surprised if we're talking 15 to 20,000 people are employed in Germany executing Tesla's vision. Some good news arrived yesterday in that it was approved for Tesla to double the size of its facilities. And among the things Elon pointed out was that they would begin construction targeting having production facilities in Germany to be able to produce the Semi, and I would assume it could also produce the Cybertruck. Now, I've been in dialogue with different folks about the fact that when you think about most of this stuff for the truck, including the battery packs, it actually mirrors what's in the rest of a Tesla vehicle. So as a result, one of the option Tesla's had for a while is to simply transition certain factories over to the semi-truck production And that way, things like the layoffs that just occurred would not have been necessary because you could just switch the job functions. Obviously, Elon chose not to do that. He's going another path. And Elon doing different is not a surprise. So my first response to comments is that, Mr. Daum, one of the problems is if you are having in Stuttgart, Germany, where the headquarters of Daimler is located, as well as Porsche, because they sit in kind of a bowl area with mountains to the left and right, unless you have appropriate winds, you build up a lot of pollution in those areas, and it's created a lot of health issues for those that live there. So this is my first answer to him in terms of why it is there's a need to make the transition more heavily into electric vehicles. And so therefore you're costing people their lives in the process of those companies continuing to operate and provide jobs. The next issue that comes up is, can the EU justify potential job losses related to the transition to electric vehicles? And the answer is, if the manufacturers chose to make that transition aggressively, you could both have the jobs preserved and have a real cleanup of air pollution that's going on. So the next thing that popped up was one of our most frequently commented viewers made a comment regarding the fact that the reason why the Tesla Semi has not shown up at scale is because it's a colossal failure. And one of the sub-elements of that is, he pointed out that there were trucks that were being used by Pepsi that were currently sitting unused at their facilities. Now, it's my understanding, having looked this up, and I'll include a clip from this, Pepsi's actually really happy with the trucks they've gotten. They initially got 38 of them that they split between two locations, Fresno and Sacramento, and they've now gotten their full complement of the first 100 vehicles, and 50 of them are now in a place called Modesto, California. And they're all running different routes, everything from 50 to 100 miles, all the way up to 400 miles. I have to say that I'm still very surprised at the decision they made to put those vehicles where they did, because the state of California has worked a deal with Pepsi where most of the cost of those trucks is being covered by the state. So it's a big surprise for me to see what they're doing right now, because they could have easily put those vehicles in Southern California, where the pollution problem is more substantial, or even move them into one of the ports and have it doing what's called drayage, where you're taking shipping containers from the Port of Los Angeles or the Port of Long Beach and moving them into inland warehouses, because that's a heavy source of pollution. And perhaps the reason they have not done that is because Daimler actually has secured the production and sort of running those routes already, is one of the reasons that might occur. But the pollution issues are way more severe in Southern California, larger population. The bowl idea I shared with you that's in Stuttgart, of the pollution collecting at the lowest points and creating a lot of health issues for the people that live there. So the answer is no, it is not a colossal failure. I will say that there's a prioritization process that most companies use in terms of what gets the priority. One of the things Elon talked about is that he thinks the Semi is a good vehicle, but the idea of the Semi was actually introduced by the chief technical officer, as you may know, J.B. Durand. And J.B.'s argument was, wait a second, how are we a company that's trying to transition into electric vehicles, and we have hundreds of trucks moving parts as well as other supplies throughout our supply chain? Hence, that's why the Semi was created to begin with. And then they came up with the idea of, well, if we own them, there are other entities trying to reduce their carbon footprints that want to do that as well. So the structure of Tesla that's worth understanding is, I want to call it a hub and spoke, is perhaps how you would articulate it. Tesla has a main plant called the Fremont factory in a place called Fremont, California, which is in Silicon Valley. At basically 20-mile intervals from Fremont, California, going east, Tesla has leased/bought as much as, I think, 5 million square foot of space where it's available and proximate to the freeways. And the closest in places are sequentially delivering parts to the Fremont factory. They store enough there perhaps for a day, day and a half. And so they have a truck loop. And having stayed in front of this and listened to it, there's a semi coming from the storage facilities into the factory pretty much every 3 minutes. You can hear the trucks downshifting as they exit the 880 freeway to enter the Tesla factory. So the initial factory, I did some calculations, and the value of the factory is somewhere between 20 and $30 billion right now, based on highest and best use of what you could do with it if it wasn't producing cars. And that's just a reflection of the value of real estate in Silicon Valley. But Elon, if you look at, for example, the newest factories in China, Germany, as well as in Austin, all those facilities were built from the ground up. The facility in Fremont is not ground up, focused on Tesla production. There is no space there, basically, and the company has chosen not to shut that facility down because it's only 15 miles to the engineering headquarters near Stanford, and a lot of the new ideas, including the robots and most advanced vehicles, are all coming out of that facility. So as a result, you've got these 500 diesel trucks, moving cars, moving parts, etc., that are constantly cycling in and out. What Elon has chosen to do is to use the largest current fleet of finished semi-trucks from Tesla to actually start replacing those diesel trucks that are part of the supply chain movement in Fremont. So pretty much from what we gathered, they have about 100 semis that make the run to parts facilities as well as all the way to Reno to pick up battery packs to bring them in. And they've been systematically cycling in Tesla semis to help in that movement of parts between locations. So it's an interesting idea because you're not costing in terms of the fuel. You also get an opportunity to increase the number of test miles that you have the vehicle on, both in the mountains of Sierra Nevada, as well as in hot and cold weather that is the norm for that area. So it is good that they're thoroughly testing the vehicles and testing it in-house. The next question that popped up is, it's been 7 years since folks put their money down and they have not received their vehicles yet. Absolutely the case. And the question is, why have those companies not chosen to ask for the money back or sue Tesla, etc.? I think there are three answers to that. One is that what you actually have happen is a lot of the sort of fleet managers for the major entities that have signed with Tesla have been coming to Silicon Valley and having managers and their engineers actually ride the trucks to determine how they might work within the supply chains of those respective customers. And so as a result, yes, they've had to wait way longer than they would have normally, but one of the mentions was of DHL, and the head of their supply chain relative to trucks was like, hey, this is a new situation, and we know that we have to be patient here, but we're confident we'll eventually get our vehicles and this will all work out fine. So I agree. I do not think it's appropriate to wait 7 years after you promised in 2 years those vehicles would be coming out and in customer hands. So the answer is at least it'll be well tested for sure once those customers do have those vehicles in hand. The other thing I find interesting is there's a secret thing going on here. Tesla has its process of how it's choosing to disseminate these vehicles. And one of the problems that's coming up is the number of companies that need to reverse engineer this vehicle because of the potential threat it represents to their futures. And so there's been a reluctance to reveal a lot of company data about every manner of how these things are working. And it increases the cycle time to how long it takes for, in particular, Daimler, but all the other competitors to sort of catch up with what Tesla's doing. I reviewed in my previous video that Daimler is actually making strides. They started off with a semi running 125 miles of range, and they're now up to about 300 miles for their best truck. And so therefore they are closing the gap on Tesla, but they have not completely done so. The other thing that's sort of going on here is that unlike the cars, there have been some problems with rapid charge for those semis. So in a lot of cases, they're running it for a 12 to 15 hour period, allowing it to charge overnight rather than cycling through superchargers, because there have been some issues with the rapid charging sort of blowing up the charging facility and down for a few days. So it makes sense that customers have chosen to take this slower charging route. So the answer is that I believe, based on the lack of finished vehicles in hand, one could imply that they either don't work or it's a bad experience. But I do think that where we're at is that the new factory has not been delivered yet, and they're able to build in small, 30 or so units a month quantities at the small sort of test factory that they have near Reno, Nevada. And those numbers are just going to increase over time dramatically as we complete the new factory in 26. The other thing I should say is that the habit that Tesla has is do not be surprised if you start to see screenshots of the Tesla Semi sort of doing test runs to customers in Europe. Elon has not released the list of folks who are sort of the early adopters of these vehicles, but there are a number of delivery companies like DHL as well as FedEx and others that have a large presence in the United States, and they also have it in Europe. So I believe what they're going to do is start testing. And then the one last thing about this that I think is difficult to manage on the Semi is that there's a lot of cost that goes in initially, obviously with the battery pack and the purchase of the truck, something on the order of $300,000 to $400,000 per vehicle. But then you also have the issue of efficiency relative to charging. So it's almost a waste of time to get one truck, wait a year, and then get another truck. It makes a lot more sense to build out your charging facilities and get a group of, 3, 5, 10, 15 trucks all at the same time, because you now have a $2 or $3 million worth of charging facilities that are idle until you can fill it up. And you can't justify the cost when only one vehicle is running. So I think that definitely is playing into this. So I want to thank you again for taking time out to visit with us and watch. We look forward to your comments on all of this. And I will also post some photos just so you can see where we are in terms of, yes, production is occurring, but it's too small a number of vehicles being produced to make a huge difference. But we have confirmed in other shows that there are a number of entities, including Walmart, that have started receiving sort of test quantities of these vehicles in the greater San Francisco area. And the engineers can keep an eye on those vehicles because they're so close, and therefore address any issues they may have before those entities receive large numbers of vehicles. Anyway, once again, we look forward to your comments on this. This is Greg for Teslafaninsight. We now switch over to our health tips. Wanted to remind you this week of the no more than once a week fried foods recommendation by our kidney docs because of the impact on the body of those fried foods. And also wanted to encourage you to consider Celtic salt along with olive oil and avocado oil, which has a higher smoke point. It doesn't dissipate as quickly in a hot pan as olive oil does, is another thing to consider. Once again, please take time to like and subscribe. Any support provided is greatly appreciated. Thanks once again. Have a great day. Bye for now. And we're going to finish with our ocean sounds that we sometimes bring in during the show as well. Thanks once again for joining us.